Okay, so I'll just show you one last point in Parshas Bo before we go to Beshalach. When Paro wants the Jewish people to leave, if you take a look back at on page 356. So at the bottom of page 356, Paro gets up. It says, "Vahi b'chatzi alayla," 356. Vahi b'chatzi, 8 lines from the Bible. Vahi b'chatzi alayla, v'Hashem hika kol b'chor be'eretz Mitzrayim. Hashem smites every b'chor, mi b'chor Paro, Yosef Akisa, ad b'chor Ashvi Asher v'Zabor, v'chol b'chor behema. Kills them all. And there are different opinions here about how they died. There's one opinion that smack dab it right at crack of midnight, they just dropped dead. The whole bunch of them, no matter what they were doing, they dropped dead. There's another opinion to the kind. Maybe we could close the door over there. They just so we can keep the cold air. There's another opinion that they actually got smitten at midnight, and then they kind of writhed in pain and then died by morning, so that the suffering went longer and the Jewish people could see them dying. There are different opinions here. Number one. Number two, if you notice that it says, now, Vayakam Paro Laila, Paro gets up at night. It doesn't say Balayla, it says Laila. Hu v'chol avoda v'chol Mitzrayim, Vahi te'itze alka gedola b'Mitzrayim. There's a tremendous yell, ki ein bayis asher ein shames. There's no home where somebody didn't die. Picture that, the whole country, every single home in the country had at least one person who died. And everybody's yelling. Vayikra LaMoshe ula Aaron Laila. Paro calls Moshe and Aaron at night. Now you notice it doesn't say Vayikra LaMoshe Aaron Balayla. Vayomer kumutzu mitochami, get up and go. Gam atem, gam b'nei Yisrael, uchivdu as Hashem kedar brechem. Go worship Hashem the way you said, and Rashi brings up, Paro was saying, everything I said was wrong. It's you and your kids and everybody and all that, everything. The question is, why is there a base left out of it? Vayikra LaMoshe u'Aaron Laila. Now the Medrash says there's a famous song the kids sing, Paro in pajamas, Bemsa Laila. They ever hear Paro in pajamas, Bemsa? Okay, so the Medrash actually says that Paro went around looking for Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, we picture Paro's living in a palace and this and that. If you ever saw the leaders of the Jewish people, if you ever saw where Rav Eliashiv lived, in a little hovel, and Rav Shteinman's house, which looked like the walls were peeling, there's no opulence there whatsoever. Certainly not in the Ashkenazi world. In the Sephardi world, a little different, because they have a slightly different approach. Of Ovadia Yosef's home was very well appointed and quite large, and so. But in the Ashkenazi world, the leaders were very, very it's not what you would expect to see by Torah leaders, by the leader of a group of people. So it says in the Medrash they went looking for Moshe Rabbeinu, probably just lived in some little house there. And he went looking for Moshe Rabbeinu's house, the Medrash says. And he saw Jewish kids. He said, where does Moshe, the kids said, well, that way. They're playing games with Paro. They're sending him, chasing him from place to place. And eventually he gets to finds Moshe Rabbeinu's house. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, I can't come out. Because the Torah said that on the night of the Makas Bechoros, it says the Jews aren't allowed to leave their houses. They're not allowed to leave the houses to go outside. So he spoke to Paro from the window. That's what the Medrash says. He spoke to him from, he says, come to the window, and he's desperate. It says, Vayikra, he's crying for Moshe Aaron Laila. So first, why doesn't it say Balayla, at night? Why Laila? So if you turn back, it's a very cute shot. When Paro, the last meeting that Paro says to Moshe Rabbeinu, after he says on page 344, take a look at page 344. The significance of which is, that was Ted Williams' lifetime batting average. He wanted to know if sports is on there. That was Ted Williams' lifetime batting average, was 344. So it says, at the bottom of 344, it says, Vayomer lo Paro, this is right after Moshe Rabbeinu, the last time they meet. Vayomer lo Paro, lech me alai. Hishomer lecha al tosef os panai, don't come back. Ki biyom roscha panai, the day you see my face, you're going to die. Paro says to Moshe Rabbeinu, the day you come back, you're going to die. So now Paro's got a problem. Because Paro can't go see Moshe Rabbeinu, because he said, if I see you, you're going to die. So unfortunately, say, what did Paro say? He said, on the day you see my face, you're going to die. So what is Paro here? Vayikra, back there, the 3 lines. Vayikra Moshe Aaron, he was calling Moshe Aaron, not Bala, he wasn't calling them at night. He was saying, Vayikra Moshe Aaron, he called to Moshe Aaron, Lila, it's night, I'm okay, you can come out and see me now, it's night. He was yelling, Lila is what he himself was yelling, not Ba'Laila. Lila, it's night, it's okay, don't worry, Lila. I don't think that's the plain meaning, by the way, but that's what one of the Forshim says. Lila, he's going, Lila, it's night. And then he's able to send the Jewish people out. Okay, so the Jewish people leave. They got a picture of 600,000 people, where the estimates are that if it's 600,000 people, men between the ages of 600,000 men between the ages of 20 to 60, so if there's a parallel amount of women and old people and young people, so there's an estimate of about 2.5 million people. 2.5 million people. Now, how much is 2.5 million people? If you ever get an idea, go to a football game, and you're looking at 60,000 people. That looks like a lot of people. Right? It looks like a lot of things. Now multiply 10 stadiums. Right? 10 stadiums is 600,000 people. Right? That means you need 20 stadiums just to get the 20 to 60-year-olds, men and women. 20 football stadiums of 60,000 people. Then you got to add 2.5 million people. You know how many football stadiums? And they're all moving together. They're all moving together. Do you ever go travel with your kids at all? You ever travel with your children? Anywhere? Just go to the zoo with your kids. You're lucky if you come home with all of them, if one of them doesn't get lost. I was a counselor once in Chicago. When I was 20, I was a counselor. I had 14 10-year-olds that I was a counselor of. And I took these kids, we had a field day. We went to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. Now, I was responsible for 14 10-year-olds. So first I warned these kids that if any one of them disappears, right, they're going to, they just stay with the group. Then what I decided was I can't take a chance. I took string, and right outside the museum, I tied a string to each one of their belts. So it looked like I was harnessed. I had 14 horses harnessed to me. More people were looking at that than they were looking at the displays in the museum. They were looking at the thing. So within a few minutes, the kids started walking around. I didn't take into consideration they're not going to stay in their lane. So the strings got all tangled up. So I had to eventually take the strings off of them. That was more fun than anything, was holding these kids on strings. And then I took the strings off them. So we go into the Museum of Science and Industry. Now I'm concerned I don't want to lose any of these kids. They have, in the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, they have a submarine from a Japanese submarine for World War II. You can actually go into the submarine. You go into the submarine and see what a submarine is like. We're standing outside the doors of the submarine. And they're like these electric doors that go open and close because they only have a certain amount of people who go in at one time. I turned around for a second and I turned back. I'm missing 6 kids. Right? Where did they go? What happened was they were kind of daydreaming and the doors opened. 6 kids just happened to walk in before the group. And I turned around and I said, where are they? I lost 6 kids at one time. I wring their necks. When they got a hold of them. What do you call it? So then we go into this Japanese submarine. That was pretty weird. In any event, that's the what do you call it? So you're talking about 2.5 million people are leaving. Okay, so we go to Parshas Beshalach. Vahi Beshalach Paro esa'am. Paro sends out the people. V'lo nocham elokim derech eretz plishtim ki korovu. Hashem did not take them by way of the plishtim because it was nearby. Ki amar elokim pen yinochemam be'eretz milchama v'shovu mitzrayim. Hashem is worried that they'll see the plishtim, they're going to want to go back. Now, the commentaries say, why does it start with Vayehi? Vayehi is often used in the Gemara, talks about Vayehi as a terminology of despair, of sadness. There are chumashim on the table here. Why does the Torah says Vayhi b'shalach? Vayhi is sadness, like Vayhi b'mei achashverosh. And the Gemara talks about whether it's Vayhi or Vayhi b'mei. But Vayhi always at least has, according to one opinion in the Gemara, Vayhi indicates problems, so it's something not good. So the Mefarshim say Vayhi b'shalach paro esa'am. Right there is not good. Right there is not good. Who sent you out of Mitzrayim? If you Jewish people see that it's Paro that sent them out of Mitzrayim, you missed the whole point. You missed the whole point. The Jews go, wow, Paro's sending us out finally. Is it Paro sending you out or Kosh Baruch Hu's taking you out of Mitzrayim? So the fact that it could even be attributed to Paro, that could be problematic. That's what the Mefarshim say. Okay, so Hashem doesn't take them by way of the Plishtim. Now, Vayasev Elokim Esam derech hamidbar Yamsuf. He takes them by way of the desert towards Yamsuf, and this is all part of Hashem's plan because he wants the Egyptians to follow them out so he can do away with them. Vachamushim alu b'nei Yisrael meretz Yitzrayim. Now the Art Scroll translates Vachamushim as they were armed when they went out of Mitzrayim. So some say they were equipped with food. They had provisions when they went out of Mitzrayim. But look at Rashi. Rashi says, I had a lot of trouble with this medrash until I finally saw one of them for him. If you look on the top of the left column, look at the top of the left column, top Rashi. Davar acher, left column on page 366. Davar acher, chamushim, echad michamisha yotzu. 1 out of 5 left Egypt. Ve'arba chalokim mesu b'shloshes yemei afela. 4/5 died during the 3 days of darkness. 4/5 of the Jews who got too connected in Egypt and they were resistant to leaving. And you can understand that people are resistant to leaving when the leader says to you, let's go. Where are we going? We're going out to the desert. And what are we going to do to survive in the desert? What are we going to eat? What are we going to drink? Where are we going to sleep? What are we going to do? And the Jewish people that go out, they show tremendous faith. Listen, as bad as it is staying in Egypt and getting whipped, to go out in a desert where there are snakes and there's no provisions, that's suicide. And the Jewish people, the pasuk that says, Lech tech acharei bamidbar, ko amar Hashem, zacharti lo chesed ne'uraych. I remember the kindness of your youth. That Lech tech acharei bamidbar, you followed me out to the desert. That's a credit to the Jewish people. So it says that 4/5 of the Jews died during the 3 days of darkness. Now, I had a problem with that. I had a logistic problem. Why did they die during the darkness? So the Egyptians shouldn't see the Jews dying. Right? That's why they died during the darkness. So they could die and they could be buried and the Egyptians don't know. I got a problem with that. Because if 4/5 of the Jews died, and there are 2.5 million that went out, that means that 10 million died, right? Did I do the math correctly? 10 million. Now, you're going to bury 10 million people in 3 days? That's a lot of Chevra Kadisha. Yeah, that's a lot of shovels, right? And not only that, in the Mitzrayim aren't going to see them dying. I understand. Yesterday there were 100 people in line at the supermarket, right? And today there are 10, or 20, whatever. A whole bunch of Jews are missing, especially on a day where there are sales, right? And all of a sudden there are no Jews in the supermarket. Well, you don't notice. Just logistically, I mean, how could so many people die? How could so many people die? So I saw one of the comments say, okay. You could always come to say, it was a nace. It was a miracle. Right? It's like when I asked my kid, hey, there was a chocolate bar in the cabinet. How did it disappear? It was a nace. Oh, it was a nace. Oh yeah, what a nace. Yeah, some nace. Yeah. So suddenly the kids all learn. They learn all the right. They know all the right halachas that they know. Yeah, that they know. They know all the right halachas. So the Hashem took it. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I understand. He got hungry. He wasn't fleishing, so he was able to eat a candy bar. So the what do you call it? So I saw one in the commentary say it doesn't mean literally 4/5 died. It means that we find the same thing by Cain and Hevel. What does it say by Cain and Hevel? Turn back for a second, all the way to the Bereshis. Okay, Cain kills Hevel, and then Hashem confronts him. And on page 20 in the Big Blue Book. So Hashem confronts Hevel, and he says over here, this is a very important rule for us in life. He says. On page Pasuk Yud. It's about a little past the middle of the page, about 11 lines off the bottom. Vayomer, Hashem says to Cain, Mea sisa, what'd you do? Kol demei achicha tzoakim elai min adama. The sound of your brother's bloods is crying from the earth. It doesn't say the sound of your brother's blood is crying from the earth. Your brother who you killed, Cain killed Hevel. Doesn't say his blood is red. Demei doesn't mean his blood. Demei means his blood's plural. Your blood's, what's that?
Just says blood.
Ooh, machlokas between the art scroll and the truth, right? Because the meaning of the pasuk is obviously his blood, but the art scroll translates it based on the meaning. But the word literally means chas v'shalom. The art scroll didn't make any mistakes. But the word bloods, the Gemara talks about why is it in the plural. Rashi brings down why is it in the plural. So one opinion is, Cain didn't know how to kill Hevel. How do you kill a person? So he injured him all over. He kept hitting him with a rock, and everywhere, the blood came out till eventually he killed him. But Rashi then brings down, I think Rashi brings down the quotes the Gemara. No, he doesn't quote the Gemara. The Gemara says, Rashi brings it down. The first line, the right column of Rashi, 3 lines from the bottom. Dmei achicha, damo v'dam zara Yosef. His blood and the blood of his offspring. That means when you killed somebody, you're not just responsible for him. That means what about all the children he would have produced? What about everybody he would have produced had you not killed him? There could be thousands and millions of people that would have come from him, and now you're accountable for them never coming into the world. It's his blood and the bloods. That's why plural. Damo v'dam zara Yosef. It's his bloods and the bloods of his people. So what happens is that over here the Parshas say not 10 million people didn't die, but the people who did die because they left Mitzrayim. What about all their future generations that never came out now? And as a result of killing them dying, so they didn't just die; their future died. Well, that's a lot of people. That's millions of people. That's 4/5 of what the Jewish people would have been today. And that's what it means that they died. Person who intermarries, he's not just killing himself. What if he would have married a Jew? He would have had children, would have had grandchildren, would have had descendants. So a person who intermarries they talk about a spiritual Holocaust. Okay? That there are more people are dying today from intermarriage than Hitler killed. Because damo v'dam zara Yosef, what about all the offspring? What about the future generations? So when a person stops to think, and we have to realize, we've spoken about this many times, that every single thing that a person does, Rav Chaim Volozhin says in the Nefesh HaChaim, what does it mean man's created b'tselem Elokim? Man's created in the image of God. It says in the we'll make a man in our image. What does that mean? In the image of God? God's non-physical. What does it mean in the image of God? Ever think about that? What does it mean we're created in the image of God? So the people will tell you it means free choice. Just like God chose to create the world, man has free choice. That's true. That's true. We're the only ones made in the image of God. Animals, we spoke yesterday, animals don't have free choice. That's true. So we're created in the image of God. Rav Chaim Volozhin says in the classic Sefer Nefesh HaChaim, ever heard of Sefer Nefesh HaChaim? It was Rav Chaim Volozhin's really was a response to a great extent to the movement of Hasidus. Because Hasidus was built very much on Kabbalah, which was the objection to that was people who were not yet at the level of Kabbalah that became the main pursuit. And Rav Chaim Volozhin, who was the main disciple of the Vilna Gaon, so he wrote the Nefesh HaChaim, in which case he includes lots of Kabbalah in there. There's lots of quotes from the Zohar. It's almost like to show you, we know it also. We've also got that. We do that too, that sort of thing. But he says a frightening thought. He says that man's created in the image of God means that the same way that God created a world, and that means that there's a lot of activity all based on God's creation. Lots of what's happening in the world, meaning everything that's happening in the world, whatever God, he's recreating the world every moment. That means everything that's happening in the world is a result of God creating it. He created it and he's recreating it. Man has to know that in a certain way, we're obviously not like God in this way, but we do mirror God to a certain extent, that what we're doing down here is affecting, in Rav Chaim Volozhin's words, millions of worlds. Every single action that we take. If you do a mitzvah, you're having effects in millions, in ways that are way beyond comprehension. And the same thing if a person does something negative, there are negative effects in all these myriad worlds. And in worlds, I don't mean like, Jules Verne's idea of worlds. Worlds meaning in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's idea of worlds, of all the spiritual realms and so on and so forth. So we parallel God, we're in the image of God, because everything that the same way that God controls everything, man, to a certain extent, we have a lot more control than we think. That's what it means to be in the image of God. That's what Chaim Volozhin says. That's what it means to be a Tzelem Elokim. Now, I tell you a story once. There was a guy, a guy got sick. He had a serious illness. So he goes to a doctor, It turns out to be a Jewish doctor. And he comes into this doctor, and he says, could you believe it? A Jewish doctor, could you believe it? And he goes into this Jewish doctor. I'll tell you, every time I read a news report and they mention the doctor's name, and it sounds like, his doctor's name is McDonald or something, your doctor's name is some Italian name. I'm wondering, wow, what happened over here? How come it's not Goldstein? You always expect to see, So this guy goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, look, you have two choices. You can either go through a course of treatment, which will be very uncomfortable. It'll extend your life for maybe 3-4 years. Or you could do nothing, and you'll die relatively painlessly within the next 6 months. So he says to the doctor, okay, I have to speak to my rabbi, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, and I'll get back to you. I'll let you know what to do. So he goes to Rabbi Moshe, and Rabbi Moshe says to him, well, let's make a calculation. In the next 3 years, how many pages of Gemara are you going to be able to learn? How many times will you make Kiddush? How many times will you put on tefillin? How many times will you answer the Menya Heshmei Rabbah? It's clear you have to do what you can, stay alive as much as you can, and do as many mitzvahs as you can. So the guy comes back to this doctor, secular doctor, comes back to the doctor, Dr. Goldstein. He says to him, okay, I spoke to my rabbi, want to go through the course of treatment. So the doctor says, okay, come back in 6 weeks. Takes time to set up the chemicals. I have to study the papers, everything else. You come back in 6 weeks, we'll start the treatment. He says, okay. Come back 6 weeks later, he knocks on the door. Dr. Goldstein opens the door. There's a guy sitting behind the desk. He's got a big black yarmulke, a big pair of tzitzis on his leg, a little beard. He says, oh, sorry, I'm looking for Dr. Goldstein. He starts walking out. So he turns to him and he says, no, it's me. So he does a double take, and sure enough, that's Dr. Goldstein sitting behind the table. So he says, what's going on? He says, I want to tell you, I've been a doctor for 30 years. In the 30 years I've been a doctor, you're the first person who's ever chosen to go through the discomfort, the option of discomfort. I went to speak to your Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, and he explained to me what Torah is, what mitzvahs are, this and that. In the last 6 weeks, my wife, my family, myself, we've become Balei Tshuvas because of your choice. Okay? Now stop and think about that. Even Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, when he told the guy, look at the number of mitzvahs that you're going to do in the next 3 years, he didn't count the doctor and the doctor's family and all future generations. But this man making that choice now gets the credit for that doctor and the doctor's family and all the future generations. You understand what's going on? That's what it means over here. Bachamushim, they died. 4/5 of them died. Could be it was literal. It could be it was literal. But it doesn't have to be literal, because you could kill 4/5 of Jewish people by simply choosing not to go out of Mitzrayim. Why didn't they want to go out of Mitzrayim? Listen, it was a difficult test. It wasn't a simple test. Let's go back to last week's Parsha. The Jewish people are told not to leave their homes the entire night. They paint the blood on the doorposts and and they stay in their house the entire night. Right? What's so difficult? Don't go out. Don't leave your house the entire night. What's so difficult? What's so hard? You know what's difficult about it? You don't know what's difficult about it? Okay. Guys, what?
The discomfort.
I don't know. They're sitting there eating roast lamb in their house. I could get used to that. If somebody said stay home and eat roast lamb, I wouldn't have a problem with that. Twist my arm. Well, you're in your home and you hear screaming. You're yelling. All over the place there's yelling. Your cousins live down the block. Your married son lives a block away. Well, you don't want to go see what's happening? You don't want to go say, maybe somebody needs help out there. And the Jewish nature is to help. The Jewish nature is to run out. You're told, stay right where you are. Have faith. It's not your people. That's a test. These are all tests for the Jewish people. Every step of the way is a test over here. And the Jewish people, to leave Egypt was a test. Moshe said, let's go. And you don't think there was one kid in the back who said, hey, Pops, what are we going to eat? What are we going to have this afternoon? You don't think there was one teenager who said, hey, we ought to listen to me, and stay. All the teenagers are always so smart, right? It's a big test over here. And the Jewish people get up and they follow Moshe out into a wilderness. Okay. Take a look at Pasuk Yutes. So Yikach Moshe es atzvos Yosef imo. Moshe takes Yosef's bones. Ki hashbeah hishbias b'nei Yisrael lemor. Yosef had made the Jewish people swear, Pakod yifkod eschem v'alisa b'satzvosai b'zeitchem. Yosef had invoked an oath on the Jewish people. He said, Hashem is going to take you out, and therefore take my bones when you go. And the Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu had to find Yosef's bones. Where did he find Yosef's bones? So who was alive at the time? Serach bas Asher. Serach bas Asher. Remember who she was? She was the one who played the harp to tell Yaakov Avinu that Yosef's alive. Yosef's the one, she was the one who broke the news. So Yaakov Avinu blessed her and said, you brought my spirit back to life, you should live forever. So Serach Bas Asher, it's a good thing to do. So Serach Bas Asher is one of the 9 people, the Medrash, the Chazal say, the Medrash says that 9 people went into Gan Eden alive. And Serach Bas Asher is one of them. So she was still around. So Moshe Rabbeinu said to her, okay, we got to leave. Where are Yosef's bones? So there are 2 opinions in the Medrash. One opinion is that they had sunk his bones. They put an iron chest and sunk it into the water, into the Nile. And Moshe Rabbeinu went to the edge of the Nile. He said, Yosef, show yourself because we're leaving. It's now or never. It's move it or lose it. We're going. There's one opinion. The other opinion is that he was put in the tombs of the kings, which is very believable. The Egyptians had all these tombs, and Moshe Rabbeinu takes the bones with him. Now, by the way, it's very interesting. If you look at the word Hashbeah, Hishbeah, right in the middle of the word, what's the root of the word Hashbeah? It also is the same word as the Hebrew word Sheva. Shavua and Sheva. Shavua is an oath, and Sheva is 7. How much is 7 times 7? 49. Hashbeah, Hishbeah. Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the Jewish people, when you get to the 49th level of impurity, that's when you're going to be leaving Egypt. Hashbeah, Hishbeah. The 7 times 7. So he said, when you leave, you're going to be taking them with you. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu carries Moshe's bones with him. Moshe carries Yosef's bones with him. And for 40 years, they're in the desert, and they have Yosef's bones. They didn't get into Eretz Yisrael. He's buried in Shechem when the people go into Eretz Yisrael. So they have the bones with him. What is Yosef's bones? What's the benefit of having Yosef's bones with them? There's a benefit. They took it out. There's no accident that Dafka Yosef's bones are going with the Bnei Yisrael. By the way, there's a medrash that Moshe took Basya Bas Paro's bones with also. Huh? Basya Bas Paro, there is an opinion that she was one of the ones who never died. There is an opinion like that. There's a contradicting medrash that you're good, you're right. Good, because there is a medrash that he took her bones with. There's another medrash that says she never died also. Basya Bas Paro was one of the ones who never died. Right, so the fact that midrashim contradict, that's not a problem. That's never a problem because you're going to get conflicting midrashim. But you're right. You're absolutely right. There's a midrash that says she lived forever. So Moshe Rabbeinu takes. What's the benefit of having Yosef's bones? It's a reminder to the people. What's the reminder? What's the reminder to the people? It's a reminder. Number one, when the chips are down, don't worry about it, because nobody in history was ever in a situation where the chips were down like Yosef. You're in the prison. You're in an Egyptian pit. What are the chances of anything? And from rags to riches, from the pit, he becomes the viceroy of Egypt. That's a reminder that we spoke about once. Yosef's the reminder. Number two, Yosef is the reminder. He was the guy who had it all in Egypt. He was a ruler for 71 years. King of Egypt, the ruler of Egypt, the longest ruler that we've ever had. And he was 71 years. And still, what did Yosef say? Get my bones out of here. I mean, it's a reminder to the Jewish people, there's nothing for us in Egypt. There's nothing for us. If Yosef himself, who lived in the most comfortable situation in Egypt, he's the ruler for 70 years, 71 years, and Yosef is saying, get me out of here, so you shouldn't have any hesitation to leave either. Okay? Now, the Jewish people go, you see open miracles here. Open miracles. Vashem holech lifneim yomam ba'mudanon. There's a pillar, a cloud during the day and a pillar at night. And this is happening every day for 40 years. After a while, you take it for granted. Okay, now take a look at Pasuk Yud. What's going on here? Oh, yeah, okay. Paro starts chasing the Jewish people. And Moshe Rabbeinu is told, tell the people, Paro thinks the Jewish people are confused because they're wandering around. And if you take a look at Pasuk, which Pasuk? Pasuk Yud. Pasuk Yud. Vayirdu fu Mitzrayim, bottom of page 10. Vayirdu fu Mitzrayim achareim, vayasigu sabachonim al hayam. Mitzrayim goes chasing after them. Kol sus rechev paro ufarosha v'chelo. All his horses and his chariots. Al pi achiros ifnei baal tzafon. This just shows you how fickle people can be. The Egyptians just sent them out. And all of a sudden, after things calmed down a little bit, like, what did we do? People have very short-term memories. What did we do? Why'd you send them out? You send them out because everybody's dying and you just got clobbered. But that was then. And they're what do you call it? They're chasing them out. They chase after them. How many of them were there? Now look what happens. Uparo hikriv. Paro gets close. Vayisu b'nei Yisrael seinem v'nei Mitzrayim nosei achalem. All of Egypt is chasing after them. Vayiru meod vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael Hashem. They cry out to Hashem. Now you'll notice that's part of the goal here. Part of the goal is to cry out to Hashem. Hashem always wants us to cry out. Tzedakah is a terminology of prayer. Remarkably, first of all, there are estimations. Again, it's a medrash, and you always have to know that the midrashim in many cases, the midrashim are an exaggeration for the sake of conveying a point. So there's one. They were outnumbered by the Egyptians. There's one medrash that says they were outnumbered by 300 to 1. If you make a calculation, being outnumbered 300 to 1 means that there were 2.5 million people times 300, which means that there are about 800 million Egyptians chasing them. Could you imagine? Imagine being chased by mainland China, right? You're being chased by everybody on mainland China. Well, even that's probably more than 800 million. You got 800 million people chasing you, right? And they all know karate. Right, you know, you'd be pretty intimidated, right? So over here you got the entire 800 million. Whatever it is, it's probably not literal. But if it says there you're outnumbered 301, that means that your perception, that's how you feel. You're outnumbered. Now, why is that? Why should you just saw them get smacked around? You saw 10 plagues. Why are you nervous? What are you worried about? You just saw that everything that happens, like Kosh Baruch Hu is taking care of you. What happens over here? So, it's interesting that there are certain times in life, and then unfortunately say that you're right, but there's a psychological, did you ever hear, remember we were talking about the Jewish gangsters? Yeah. Okay, so there was a Jewish gangster named Buchalter. And this guy was promised that he was, the federal government went after him, what's his name, J. Edgar Hoover, promised him that if he turns himself in, that they'll give him an easier sentence. So he lied to him. He turned himself in, and they sentenced him to the electric chair. Right. So this Buchalter, when he was in court, he's under federal. He's in shackles, and he's in a federal court. And there was a guy who was called to testify against him. And when the guy stepped forward, this is a guy who had been one of his former soldiers, because he was a gangster. And he had to testify now against the boss. He was shaking in court. They said they was shaking in court. The guy was helpless. He couldn't do anything. He was absolutely shaking, because when it's a guy that you've been intimidated, that intimidation doesn't leave so fast. He was absolutely intimidated by it. I had a friend who was a real good basketball player, really good basketball player, and I once watched him. He was a little older than me. He was better than me, actually, if you could believe it. There were only two people in Chicago that were better. There was him and Michael Jordan. Right? They were the only two that were better. This guy was better than me, and he was a little guy, but he's quick as daylight. And I once watched him play one-on-one with his older brother. Now this guy, he was also very tough. This guy used to beat me up all the time. His older brothers used to beat him up. They made him tough. They made him really tough. He was playing against. I watched him play against his brother. His brother was nowhere near as good as him, just a little bigger. The guy was shooting, he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. Right? He kept missing and missing and missing. I said to him after, what happened to you? He said he's playing his brother, he's just got him psyched out. He can't, he's just too intimidated because it's his brother. This is the same brother used to beat him up. So there's psychologically, you could be intimidated. Do you know that there's a certain bird? There's a snake that sees a bird up in a tree. I saw a video of this once. There's a snake that sees a bird up in the tree. The bird's up in the tree, the snake's on the ground. And the snake looks at the bird. And the bird sees the snake, becomes paralyzed with fear of that they can't do anything. The bird could just flutter away. The bird just looks at him, freezes, and eventually you just see the bird, and you're sitting there watching the video going, no, just fly, just fly, bird, fly. And the bird's just looking at the snake, he just like he freezes up, and eventually just falls out of the tree right by the snake gobbles him up. And you're watching the intimidation. That's how the Jewish people felt over here. The total intimidation, the Egyptians are coming after them. So it says over here, and you're watching this video, thinking, come on, bird, just fly, will you fly? And there he goes, he falls. So it says over here that they cry out to Hashem. No, that's right. They're afraid, so they cry out. So look what Hashem says to them. Skip down. Moshe says to the Jewish people, look at Pasuk Yud Gimel. Vayomer Moshe el ha'am, al tira'u, don't be afraid. Hisyatzvu, stand firm. Uru es Yeshuas Hashem asher yaseh lechem hayom. Ki asher ra'isem es Mitzrayim hayom lo sosifu l'rosa bod ad olam. You see me in Egypt today, you're never going to see him again. Now you see him, now you don't. They're going to disappear. And remarkably, if you look at the Nach, the Jewish people, when they go into the land of Israel, Egypt is essentially the backyard of Israel. The Jewish people are attacked by Ammon. They're attacked by, if you look at the Nach, they're attacked by Ammon, they're attacked by Moab, they're attacked by Midian, they're attacked by Aram, they're attacked by all sorts of nations. We never find any hassle from Egypt. For 500 years, Egypt isn't mentioned as being bothering the Jewish people. Isn't that remarkable? Egypt's out of the picture. When did they lose? When did they get knocked out? Right over here. Hashem says to Moshe, you see him now, you're never going to see him again. And you see the evidence of it in the Nach, that they're never attacked by the Egyptians. Wouldn't you? I mean, if you were the Egyptians after what the Jewish people did to you, I would invade. Yeah. And they never bother them anymore. Egypt is devastated. The whole country of Egypt is devastated until later on the Greeks move in and take over, and it's a completely different nation. The Egyptians are gone. Egypt, as they knew it then, is gone. They're never going to bother you again. And then he says, Hashem yilochem lachem v'atem tacharish. Hashem will battle for you, you be silent. So the Meshech Chochmah says, you know what that means? Hashem will battle for you and you be silent. The Meshech Chochmah says that the plain meaning is, don't yell. You've yelled enough. Now watch, Hashem's going to do battle for you. The Meshech Chochmah says, Hashem yilochem lachem. Right now, why do you demand Hashem should battle for you? Because you showed loyalty to God. You followed out. You did exactly what he wanted. You brought the Korban Pesach. Hashem, you have right now rights. By rights, so to speak, even though we have no rights, but by rights you can demand Hashem should fight for you because he put you in this situation. Says the Meshech Chochmah. And in the future as well. Hashem yilochem lachem, Hashem will battle for you. Ve'atem kama, ve'atem tacharishun. Even in the future where you have no rights because you've been disloyal, Hashem will battle for you then also. Hashem yilochem lachem, even when you have no rights. Depends where you put the comma. Okay? Hashem yilochem lachem, so it's like what they say, you know, somebody knocks on your door, say, or your guest is leaving. What does it say? How does it go? I forgot. I told you about the kid in the swimming pool, though, right? Kid jumps into the hotel swimming pool. He starts swimming in a hotel swimming pool. The guard says to him, hey, there's a sign, kid, can't you see it? It says no swimming allowed. He says, it's not what it says. It says, no, swimming allowed. You learn Gemara. Right? So it depends where you put the comma. Okay. Pasuk Tezvav. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. There's another expression they use that for. If when somebody's leaving your house, you say, I hate to see you go. Right? You know, if somebody leaves, you always say, oh, I hate to see you go. Now, it depends where you put the comma. You can also say, oh, I hate to see you. Go. So it just depends where you put the comma. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. That's why, you escort your guests 4 amos. You're supposed to escort your guests. I always escort my guests 4 amos. Okay? Make sure they go. 4 amos. There's a rabbi had a guest in the house, and all of a sudden the guest is talking. All of a sudden the rabbi gets up and he opens the window. So the guest says to him, why'd you open the window? He says, I always open the window 2 minutes before my guests leave. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Ma titzak elai, why are you yelling? Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'Yisa. Okay, this we'll leave for tomorrow because we're going to go into the entire concept of why they have to move. All right.